Hello, everybody, and happy Thanksgiving. You're tuned into the Couch GMs podcast on Thursday, November 25th, 2021. I'm your host, George Kerth, here along with Tyler Snyder. Tyler, what is up?
Not a whole lot, George. I'm excited for the greatest holiday that there is outside of NFL kickoff, and that is Thanksgiving because you got food, you got family, and you got football. Best holiday out there, so I'm excited.
Me as well. And we also got Cody Roadcap in the house. Cody, I want a little story about your shirt here.
Alrighty, so my shirt is, I don't know if you can see it, it's Scoopski's Potatoes, famous line from the Impractical Jokers, because I will be eating tons of Scoopski's Potatoes today. And then I also, over here, got my good old turkey hat, breaking out my turkey hat for the show. Little turkey guy. Doesn't really fit my head, so I'm going to take it off. But yeah, Thanksgiving, great holiday. Glad to be talking football on this glorious day.
Yes, we will be talking some football on this glorious day. We're going to hit some news and notes that have happened since Tuesday, and we're going to give you a full Week 12 preview minus the Thanksgiving games. If you're looking for a Thanksgiving preview, head back to our Tuesday episode. We broke down all three games. But why don't we just jump right in here and talk some NFL news? And first off, one of the I don't know if I want to call it a shocker, but a little bit of a shocker move here. The Texans waived running back Philip Lindsay, who was then claimed by the Miami Dolphins. So one side, the Texans now do not have a stacked backfield anymore. We're down to David Johnson. The Dolphins now have a very crowded backfield, adding Lindsay into that backfield where they already used three guys, when even though I think there was only one that stood out. But any thoughts about adding Lindsay first off?
Not really.
No, I still think Gaskin is the better running back there, and I think they split carries way too much in that offense to really give love to Lindsay. And on the flip side, I know the next question would be, well, now that Lindsay is gone, is there any thoughts to David Johnson being a possible starter for you? No, that is still the Texans. They still are garbage. I still would not start David Johnson.
Yeah, I agree with not picking up David Johnson either. You said they're not a stacked backfield. It might not be as good as it was on the season, but they had five guys with starting experience. So now they've lost Lindsay and Ingram, but they still have Rex Burkhead, Royce Freeman, not big names, but guys that do have experience. So David Johnson isn't a guy I'm going out after either. So hopefully, Philip Lindsay did have some strong years in Denver. Maybe he gets a little revitalization, but I think Gaskin will still be the guy there moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I could only imagine the backfield with those names on a team that actually was competent. Like, they could have just ran over people, but because of how poor the Texans are built, it's just been a mess, and I think it will continue to be. I'm with you guys. Moving on to quarterback news. Aaron Rodgers had a very interesting start to the week. He started off on Pat McAfee, where he was talking about his toe, and then he would say, I don't want to really talk about my medical conditions anymore. And then there was a news article that thought he had COVID toe, which apparently is a thing that I never heard of. He then proceeded to show his toe on a press conference and said that he has a fractured toe. It is not COVID toe. Cody, I'll let you pick it up from here because you probably know even more than I do.
I think you hit it pretty nail on the head there. There was speculation it was a COVID toe, that he consulted with Toe Rogan to figure out what was going on, but it's a fractured toe. It is apparently very painful. There is definitely some pain management being involved. Could possibly look to have surgery over the bye week. The Packers do have a week 13 bye, but he was adamant that the only option that is completely off the table is anything that takes him out of the game sitting out. So whether it's surgery, just rest, pain management, he will be playing for the foreseeable future. So you don't have to worry about possibly losing Aaron Rodgers for your playoff run.
Man, people were talking about Aaron Rodgers' toe as if he had snapped his leg in half and was dragging himself around the field and still playing with it. They're like, oh man, but Rodgers' toe. Like, Baker Mayfield has 17 injuries that he's playing through, like torn this and broken that, and he's still playing. But we're like, oh man, but yeah, who cares? Aaron Rodgers has a toe injury. It's like, oh my gosh. I feel like the media, anything that has to do with Rodgers gets blown out of proportion every time. And this is no different. I'm not
Yeah,
saying
this
it
goes
doesn't hurt.
back to those.
I'm sure it
This
does,
goes
but
back to those like summer stories of Rogers burnt a steak last weekend. Like,
with
I
Chris
don't
Pratt.
understand.
Yeah,
With
that
Chris
was.
Pratt.
I'm like, thanks. This is great news. This doesn't let the man live his life. The fact that he's been asked about it so many times and like people kept prying for like this toe injury, and like now, granted, he could have just come out and said I had a fractured toe, but that's not Aaron Rodgers. He likes to beat around the bush. He's like, it's worse than turf toe. It has something to do with the bone. And then people were like, COVID toe. And so then he had to come on and he literally held up his foot during his virtual press conference on Wednesday. Never thought I would see pictures of Aaron Rodgers holding his foot go viral. So if you're into weird stuff, maybe go find that on Twitter. If not, keep listening to the rest of our podcast.
that's enough for me. All right.
If you go to Twitter, make sure you come back here after. Let's just say that. But we got to get to, I think, a little bit more serious news. I feel like we don't know a lot. It came out this morning as a press release from the Vikings that Everson Griffin, the defensive lineman, locked himself in his home. There was a video of him on Instagram with a handgun, and he was worried about somebody outside. It turns out he may have been having a mental breakdown, and they are trying to find him some help. We're wishing him the best. And if there's anything else that comes out about this, we'll keep you guys updated. But really, it's just focusing on Everson Griffin and making sure he's all right and in a good state of mind.
Yeah, and as of time that we are recording this podcast, he is apparently still locked inside his home and refuses to come out. Police have had to barricade the roads leading to his house to stop people from coming closer, but he still will not leave his house. And he's had episodes in the past of mental health issues, so hopefully everything's okay. One of the things, so the video is all over Twitter. If anybody really wants to see it that badly, they can go find it. And there's also some screenshots of some texts that he was sending, I believe, to his agent, but I'm not sure, saying like, people are trying to kill me, please send help right now. Like, it's sad. But in the video, he does say, he holds his gun up to the camera and says, Dalvin Cook bought me this gun, or helped me find this gun, or whatever. And that's another thing worth noting, because now you're throwing a guy who's already dealing with legal issues, you're throwing his name out there in the middle of a mental breakdown video involving a gun. That is not good for Dalvin Cook's sake.
Yeah, this whole situation is definitely not good. But it's just another important reminder that mental health is just as important, if not more important than your physical health. Don't be afraid to reach out. I feel like this year we have seen a ton of players need to take time away, um, and it's great that those players are bringing that to light, letting them, get that time away, get their mental health. And like you mentioned, this is multiple occasions now for Everson Griffin. So really, we just want the best for him. Let him get the help that he needs so he can come out on a better side. And if you're dealing with anything out there, don't be afraid to reach out. You can reach out to us. You can reach out to your own family or friends. You can reach out to the anonymous hotlines that you can find online. But don't be afraid to reach out. Your mental health is extremely important, and you have to take care of it.
Amen to that, Cody and Tyler. Just hoping for the best out of him. And I think then we can move on to one other piece of news before we go to our preview. Giants fired offensive coordinator Jason Garrett. Freddie Kitchens, former head coach of the Browns, is now going to take over the play calling on the offense for the Giants. As an Eagles fan who still has to play the Giants twice, I'm kind of worried about this. I feel like that's going to be an improvement over Mr. Clapper over there.
It's
It's
Freddie
an improvement.
Kitchens. It's still Freddie Kitchens. Like, it's not like they're having some, big name guy step in and fix it. I don't know.
I mean, Freddie Kitchens had success in relief in the past. I mean, he earned that head coaching job in Cleveland by being able to step in midseason and bring success to a team. I'm not saying he's the best offensive coordinator in the league, but he's had success doing this in the past.
Yeah, and I don't have the exact numbers before me, but there was a game that Jason Garrett had COVID, and I feel like that was one of the better games for the Giants offense, was when Freddie Kitchens was calling plays. It'll be interesting, and it would be the most Giants thing if Freddie Kitchens gets this offense going and he ends up becoming the head coach. Like they move on from Joe Judge and he becomes the head coach. That'd be the most Giants thing. But Des Bryant, I know we don't typically do quotes of the week on this episode. We did it earlier, but Des Bryant had maybe the quote of the year. And I don't know if you guys saw it, but he said after hearing about the news about JG, referring to Jason Garrett, he said, "Kadarius Toney, you will get to experience the love and joy for football throughout your career now." Like, what about
Oh,
just swinging from the top ropes coming after Jason Garrett? Des Bryant did not hold
it's a
back.
man who
So
played with Jason Garrett for like years.
I know. So fantasy owners, if you believe in Des Bryant, if you understand that he didn't catch it, but you still think he had some talent, maybe you're looking at Kadarius Toney a little bit more now as a guy that could excel in the post Jason Garrett days.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. And we can talk more about that Giants changeover when we get to the Giants game in our Week 12 preview. Starting off our Week 12 preview, we'll hit you the buys. There's only 2 this week, but they're big names. We also mentioned it back on our Tuesday show. It's the Kansas City Chiefs and the Arizona Cardinals. So a lot of weapons for you to fill on top of already having all these other injuries around the league too. So we'll try to find our best, or do our best to find you some guys who can be solid fills in your lineup at the skill positions, maybe even quarterback. Why don't we start it off here with a pretty solid 1:00 game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Indianapolis Colts. Starting on the Bucs side, it's still tough to see where their wide receiver room is going to be when it comes to like Antonio Brown. It's a little early in the week for us to tell if he's going to play or not, but I think Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are going to be good. There's no locks in your lineup. Rob Gronkowski getting back in the lineup last week was positive, and he actually had a good game. It's been so long since the beginning of the season where he had his breakout. He's probably someone you can throw right back in your lineup every single week now. Do you agree?
I think he's at least up there on the dartboard. He's probably around like the Dawson Knox, the TJ Hawkinsons. Um, he might end up with 2 catches. He could end up with 8 catches and 2 touchdowns. Like there is definitely still a wide spread for a guy like Gronkowski. I was totally blanking on his first name. Rob Gronkowski, definitely a guy for him. It is interesting to note we are recording this on Wednesday, a little bit earlier than usual because of the Thanksgiving holiday. But as of right now, Antonio Brown didn't practice, Mike Evans didn't practice, and Chris Godwin was limited in practice. But Rob Gronkowski was a full participant. So a lot of moving pieces on their offensive weapons. Definitely make sure you stay tuned come game time, and we'll let you know who is in and who is out.
Guys, I have one interesting thing to say now that we're talking about Gronk. So we've been talking for the last 2 years that the hardest position to fill is tight end. That everybody sucks outside the top guys, and it's so hard to fill. And we've been saying it all year that it's the tight end dartboard, and you kind of got to just throw a dart and hope you hit a good tight end for the week. But is tight end actually becoming the most consistent position in fantasy this year? Like, hear me out. Quarterbacks have been weirdly bad this year, so quarterbacks are hard to find. Running backs, with the amount of injuries that's going on and the amount of committees in the backfield, it's kind of hard to guess them most weeks. Wide receivers, a lot of them are becoming dependent on their quarterbacks. The quarterbacks are having bad games, the receivers are too. But a tight end, we got Kelsey, Andrews, Waller, Gasecki, Henry, Ertz, Pitts, Hawkinson, Schultz, Knox, Goddard, Fant, Fryermuth, Kittle, Higbee, Gronk. Like, these are all startable guys. We're getting a lot of like solid tight ends. Is this the first year that we're like, finally, the tight end is actually a solid position?
I don't think so because I don't think the averages. I think even like the guys at the top, like Travis Kelsey had a few weeks where he had a 0.7 game, he had a 2.3 game, he had a 6.5 game, which you don't want that from a guy you expected a lot more out of, especially taking him in the first round. Darren Waller, he's been up and down, so it's not like there's a lot of guys that are startable, but I feel like there hasn't been a true tight end that has been consistent except maybe Zach Ertz since he's got to Arizona.
But like, I'll back you up a little bit, Tyler. Like, while it may not be as deep as like a running back or a wide receiver where you have X amount of guys who are consistently going to get you 15 points pretty much every week, when it comes to our expectations for tight ends, when you're like, oh, I just want them to get at least 8, that group this year has grown from 5 to 6 to probably 12 to 15. You're right. Like, there's an improvement. While there's not really any boom guys this year, like there's only two tight ends right now over 100 points in half PPR format, it looks like. The amount of depth tight ends who can get you a decent week at a snap of a finger has grown dramatically. So I get exactly what you're talking about, and you're right.
Speaking of startable tight ends, let's go ahead and move on to the Indianapolis Colts, where they don't have one. Mo Alley Cox should not be started. I mean, you're not starting him unless you are absolutely desperate. But other guys on the Indianapolis Colts that are worth starting, Carson Wentz has been a pretty consistent quarterback. He hasn't been solid, but he's been consistent. Jonathan Taylor's an obvious play. He's going to be one of the top players in fantasy this year. But you guys stressed some concerns about Michael Pittman down the stretch earlier in the year. How do you feel about him in this matchup against a tough Bucs defense?
I saw this and it did raise a red flag. I think if he was coming off of another good week and he was still having this consistent play, I would have been, oh no, you start him and forget it. But we see that schedule coming up. We saw that he had a bad week last week, and now you have to at least second guess yourself a little bit, assess your options, and see what you've got. I mean, he's still going to fall solidly into low wide receiver 2 or strong flex category, in my opinion. So you have to have some good options to, fill in for a guy who's going to get wide receiver 1 targets. But the matchup scares me a little bit. You have to temper your expectations.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much where I'm at with. It's not a great matchup. I'm willing to move him out of my starting lineup. Especially if you're a team that's fighting for a playoff spot, or a team that maybe you have a couple guys on Thanksgiving Day and they had a rough couple games. Maybe and you need a win. Michael Pittman might be a safe option, but it might be time to take a flyer on a different flex option or a different wide receiver that has a higher ceiling than Michael Pittman. This doesn't seem like the best matchup. I do know that they're getting a couple cornerbacks back from IR. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense is looking to rear up here down the stretch. But guys, I think we got to talk about the next game. It is definitely the game of the week.
Oh, easily. Hands down, by far.
If you're wondering, that is the New York Jets at the Houston Texans. All right, this is going to be the quickest breakdown we've ever had for two teams. Zach Wilson is supposed to be back because both Mike White and Joe Flacco are on the COVID list. So take that with a grain of salt. Does that maybe steer you away from any of their options? But I'll let you go with both teams because we'll talk about them together. Who are you starting?
Elijah Moore, maybe. I mean, I liked him better without Zach Wilson, but he's been so good. I'm gonna check him up. Okay.
The startable guys have been Brandon Cooks, who they have scored a touchdown in an away game once in 8 weeks, and I know this is a home game for the Texans, but still, that offense has not been rolling. I still would not start Brandon Cooks. I like that Tyrod's back. Tyrod might be a borderline quarterback start in a much deeper league if you really need somebody. But Brandon Cooks is not doing anything for you. David Johnson's not doing anything for you. Elijah Moore is a good play. I like him there. But at running back, Michael Carter was really the only guy we're starting on the Jets side, and now he's going to be out. And I don't really like Ty Johnson that much. So, yeah, you got Elijah Moore and potentially Tyrod Taylor.
I mean, if you're really desperate, like this is the only game to play David Johnson because the Jets' run D has been so bad. But like we're talking like serious levels of desperation to roll him out.
So desperation, would you rather play Ty Johnson or David Johnson?
Oh Lord. Probably
because they're probably both available. So
I'd probably play David Johnson just because I'm not 100% convinced that they're going to give the job fully to Ty Johnson, and we're not going to see like the Tevin Coleman experience yet again.
Although Ty Johnson is a pass catcher, I know David Johnson can be as well. So if you're in a PPR league, maybe you can go with Ty Johnson a little bit more just because of those potential PPR points. But gosh, I really hope you're really not in a situation where you're desperate enough to start either of them.
All right, you hear that out there, everyone? In 16-team 2 flex leagues, if it's a PPR, it's Ty Johnson. Otherwise, it's David Johnson. Why don't we move on to a game that's a little bit better? The Philadelphia Eagles going to the New York Giants. At least there's fantasy starters in this game. We can just start with that.
Yeah, there's difference makers in this game.
Yeah. I guess I can start with the Eagles side because you're probably going to tell me to do that anyway. We're obviously rolling out Jalen Hurts, Dallas Goedert. Devontae Smith has been solid enough, even though he had a little bit of a hiccup last week. I think he can definitely go into your lineup in a favorable matchup against the Giants. And then we have to talk running backs. Jordan Howard's probably going to miss this week. So that does make the pool of running backs for the Eagles a little less deep. And I will say, even though Miles Sanders did not super impress you with his score last week, he got 16 carries. That's more carries than he's gotten all year, if I'm remembering correct. He might have gotten more week one. That would have been the only time. That coming right off an injury tells me that Miles Sanders could be a solid start, especially in a good matchup. And there's a lot of good matchups down the stretch.
Do you know what's sad? You said most carries all year, and I thought you meant like combined. And like that's how bad they
It's
were.
honestly close, but like no, he had a couple in 9. So when you add 2 of those together, it's already over. But it's too close that you even thought that, and it's actually almost true.
Yeah. So,
it still
but
blows my
definitely,
mind that Miles Sanders goes down, and they're like, "Wow,
Mhm.
now that we have these backups and practice squad players, we should totally run the ball." It still
Yep.
blows my mind, but at least they're still running the ball. So yes, I
Mhm.
agree. Miles Sanders is a good play. Devontae Smith is working himself into a startable wide receiver as well. Jalen Hurts is an obvious start. Dallas Goedert's an obvious start. George, you're the resident Eagles fan. Is there any other Eagles we should be on the lookout for here?
Um, Technically their wide receiver 2 is Jalen Rager, and he has had I think 9 receiving yards in the last 4 weeks combined. If you have to take a flyer on somebody, the big play threat is Quez Watkins. He can get you a 80-yard touchdown any given week, but I don't like his volume or his playing time enough to even think about it. I'd rather go to another big play wide receiver on another team.
And with
and I
Miles
also think
Sanders
this.
back, is Kenneth Gainwell going to actually start getting usage again? Like, is that going to be a thing?
I think Boston Scott's your best bet as an RB2 right now. And Gainwell may actually be active on game day and get a couple carries without Jordan Howard, but your best bet if you need a second running back out of this game, or out of this team, I should say, is definitely Boston Scott.
And I think the
Boston Scott
Eagles.
is also a Giants killer. That's worth noting. He's had 3 of his best games of his career against the Giants. So
So it sounds like George is all in on Boston Scott this week.
Miles
But
Sanders.
I heard Boston Scott more than I heard Miles Sanders. I don't know about Snyder, but that's what I heard more from him. And I will say the Eagles defense is definitely a solid uh, streaming option against the Giants. They're getting a new offensive coordinator. There could be some cute wrinkles, but they've been playing really well. Their secondary is legit, and all season long, the Giants have been dealing with a ton of injuries in the secondary, and that continues this week. You know, Kyle Rudolph, didn't practice Wednesday with an ankle injury. Sterling Shepard did not practice with a quad injury. Kadarius Toney did not practice with a quad injury. You want to go to the running back, Saquon Barkley, limited with his ankle. Like there's a lot of guys, a lot of pass catching options that are limited or not practicing on Wednesday. Doesn't mean that they're completely ruled out for the game, but this is not the secondary you want to trust Daniel Jones and those wide receiver options.
So you wouldn't even give a thought to Kenny Galladay if he's the only one active? Because I know, like, generally when the Giants only have one big name wide receiver active, they tend to actually have a good game because there's no one else around. So say you're missing Toney and Shepard, you would not even think about Galladay just because of the defensive matchup.
I think
I mean,
Slay knows enough about Galladay to slow him down. Like they did play together in Detroit.
Fair.
that is fair. And plus, from what I watched, I don't think Galladay is really a top receiving option in that offense anymore. I saw them trying to force the ball to Kadarius Toney to try to get him involved. Um, but I really didn't see much out of Galladay at all for 2 weeks now, and really all season. He hasn't done really much to warrant being started. I mean, heck, I'm dropping him in most leagues that I have him. Um, I will say that I I think it's promising what I've seen out of Kadarius Toney. I think he's a big play waiting to happen, and I think the Giants really, really, really want to use this guy. But I've seen a lot of rookie mistakes. I mean, we were talking about it this past Monday night game where I was like, Toney has made 6 mistakes just because he's trying to do too much. He keeps trying to go east and west instead of just going north and south. If he would just run forward, he would get so many more yards than trying to dance around and stuff. But with all that being said, I think he's a dynamic playmaker. And if you're in a dynasty league and, maybe you're not in a playoff spot right now, you're trying to build for the future and trying to get back up for the next few years, maybe go out and get a guy like Kadarius Toney. Trade away one of your older vets that can help somebody else for this year and get a guy like Kadarius Toney for the future. I think he's going to be a promising young kid, and he's really going to help out your team in the future.
I love that advice. And honestly, don't even be afraid to throw in a first or second round draft pick in your dynasty leagues. This is not a deep offense and weapons draft that we have seen for the last few years. So if you're not one of like the top 3 picks, like there's just not those elite guys that we're used to. So they could even be, thrown in for a guy like Kadarius Toney, who went a little bit later because of the top talent, but looks like he's promising. Then you're not waiting on a rookie. It could help your rebound. One last guy for the Giants I do want to mention. It's a dart throw, but that is Evan Ingram, and that is solely because Caden Smith and Kyle Rudolph are not both practicing on Wednesday. If they're both out, you would have to think he would be the go-to tight end. Kyle Rudolph has been getting quite a bit of, or not, I shouldn't say quite a bit, but he's definitely getting a decent amount of targets that you would think would go to Evan Ingram, especially if the corners have the wide receivers locked up and there's not that many passing options. But definitely one, it's more of who actually ends up playing. But if they're pretty limited, Evan Ingram could find your way into your lineup.
Guys, I might be
I could
overstepping a
definitely
little bit
see.
here, but I think this is going to be a big Saquon Barkley week. I know we mentioned him already, but I just wanted to reiterate that new offensive coordinator. They're probably not going to want to go out there and pull off a bunch of, you know, deep pass plays and really try to air it out. Daniel Jones has been struggling. Saquon Barkley's back. He's in a rhythm now after having a game under his belt. I think that his carries are going to go up. And I think the offensive coordinator is really going to try to utilize him because of the fact that it is basically a new offense now. I can see a really big game out of Saquon Barkley this week.
And just to go back one more time to that conversation Tyler was mentioning we had on Monday, my favorite quote, man, Daniel Jones is going to make a really good backup someday.
Yeah, most of the mistakes I don't think were Jason Garrett. I mean, a lot of it looked like Daniel Jones. He made a lot of really bad throws. He has so much potential and so much talent, but he just makes so many dumb plays that he's going to make one hell of a backup one day.
That's enough Giants talk for my entire life. We can move on then to the Carolina Panthers traveling to the Miami Dolphins. You can start with the Panther side of the ball because they're in a very interesting case with Cam back in there. And one person who I want to talk about right off the bat is Robbie Anderson because he now has touchdowns in back-to-back games. He looks like he's starting to come around. And it could just be because of Cam, but does he keep that up? Is this what Cam did last week sustainable?
I don't think that what they're doing is because Cam Newton is playing that well. I think Cam Newton is playing well, don't get me wrong. But I think the reason why Robbie Anderson looked better, why Cam Newton's putting up points, why DJ Moore finally got a touchdown after not doing anything, is because of the energy that he brings. I mean, they are rallying around Cam Newton. This was their guy. This is the one that everybody in Carolina just worshipped, and then he left, and now he's back. He's bringing them up from the ground up. I think the whole team is buying into Cam Newton. All of the fan base is buying into Cam Newton, and I think that just the energy that he brings and the morale boost is making this offense play so much harder. They want to look good for him. So I think everybody in the offense, whether Cam plays great or not, is going to get a boost now.
Yeah, that's some pretty good advice. It is interesting. We talked a little bit about targets on our previous show this week, and DJ Moore has had 7 targets in 3 straight games. Talk about consistency. He did find the end zone last week, but it's still been back and forth. It seems whichever one between DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson find the end zone scores the points. The other one gets less than 4. I don't know what it is going on. They're not sustainable, both being good that week. I'm going to have to say I like DJ Moore slightly better if I'm going to have to pick between the two, but there's still guys I don't have a ton of confidence in starting, even with Cam Newton back there, because we've seen Cam Newton loves to go to Christian McCaffrey and Cam Newton likes to run the ball. And I think Cam Newton is another viable streaming option this week until he proves you wrong. We saw it. I don't want to get too carried away like I did last year after one full week of performance, but he looked good in week 1 of last year. He looked really good starting this year. If he can continue this momentum, like you mentioned, the energy is definitely rocking around Carolina right now with him back. So let's see if they can ride this momentum swings, especially Cam Newton.
Definitely agree with that. We can move on then to the Dolphins side. I think the addition of Philip Lindsay isn't going to do too much this week, but in the end, I think it's just going to make that backfield even worse. So Myles Gaskin, the last time we had a chance to play him, may be gone now. And especially in this matchup, I wouldn't have touched him regardless. Tua's in a tough matchup here, but I somehow, for some reason, have a feeling he still might be a good play this week. Is that just me trying to overreact to how Tua has been playing well, or would you still consider playing him against a tough defense?
I personally would not be starting Tua. I think the Panthers still have a really good defense. One other Panther we didn't mention was the Panthers defense. I mean, a lot of leagues do still play team defenses, and if you do, Panthers defense is available in a lot of free agencies. You can go pick them up, and I think this is a good matchup for them. But really, I trust Gasecki. I trust Jalen Waddle. I don't trust Tua. And I know if Gasecki and Waddle are getting the ball, that doesn't make sense. Then how is Tua not that great? But I don't trust Tua enough yet to be playing him in a tough matchup like this. I mean, he's shown flashes these last couple of weeks, but I do like Jalen Waddle, especially in a PPR league. I like Waddle and Gasecki because they both receive the targets, and I think those are really the only two members of this offense that do anything anymore. Gaskin's not really getting the volume that he should. Neither are these other running backs. I mean, you see like a Mac Hollins or an Albert Wilson come out of nowhere and just grab some catches and stuff. But for the most part, it's this offense is running through Gasecki and it's running through Waddle. And I think those are the only two fantasy guys you can start.
Yeah, I don't mind playing Gaskin still. I don't think he's completely lost the job. I don't think Philip Lindsay will fully break in, being on the team for only a week. I still think Gaskin could be like the bottom of the barrel at running back to flex options this week. It is a good matchup. I do want to note, Will Fuller is back at practice. We've seen him come back once or twice. He could just end up replacing the deep threat that Matt Collins has been. I don't think it truly affects a Jalen Waddle or Mike Gesicki at first. And then back to Tua, he's a very safe play. He's actually only broken 20 points twice this whole year, but he is very consistent between the 15 to 18 points. So if you need just a safe, solid number, like this is where you evaluate your lineup. If you just need if you know you just need points, like Tua is not a bad play. He'll get you 15. But if you need a big swing, Tua is definitely not your guy.
So, one quick question for you guys before we move on to the next matchup, and it is not fantasy related. I just honestly was curious what your thoughts are. So the Dolphins have had like three running backs that they like to rotate in and get all of them usage, and yet they still went out and got Philip Lindsay. The Dolphins are 4-7. Do you think they're still in this and really trying to make a push for the playoffs, or do you think this is just the depth move and they like Lindsay for the future?
I think a lot of it has to be they like Lindsay for the future because we got to think the only reason that he was a free agent as quick as he was and everything else, he was an undrafted rookie that just didn't quite stick in Denver. The dude's probably only like what 24 or 25 years old. He's got a lot of time ahead of him, and from everything that they've been doing with this running back by committee, it tells me that they're not convinced that Gaskin is a long-term start for them. So this is their swing at taking a guy who has been a successful starter when he was with Denver, didn't quite stick, but has a chance to be a solid running back. I think it is a shot of they think they like him. He could be a long-term piece. It's not a this is a play for now kind of thing.
I actually don't know if it's more. It might be like let's get an early look because he's a unrestricted free agent after the end of the year. It's not like it was multiple years left on this deal when they claimed him. So maybe they're trying to get ahead of that. But I don't think Brian Flores is a guy that ever thinks he's out of it. You know, they might be 4-7, but that's really only 2 games behind a wild card spot. That's, I mean, a lot to make up. But we're only in week 12. We have till week 18. There's a lot of games left, to unravel. I know right now, like pretty much all the teams in the AFC North are, right there, like eating up the wild card spots. But they all got to play each other. Like there's going to be losses. Like this team, no, they did it last year. They went on a run near the end and almost squeaked into the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised if it comes to week 18 and they need a win to get in or need a win and some help because they've fought their way back. So maybe Philip Lindsay is, they're trying to add talent to make a playoff run.
All right, fair enough. All right, guys. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next matchup then. Um, Not thrilled to talk about it. We got Tennessee Titans at the New England Patriots. I was looking forward to this matchup a couple weeks ago because the Patriots are the new love of the AFC. Everyone's saying they're the new best team in the AFC and they're going to make the Super Bowl and all this stuff. And Tennessee is the top team in the AFC record wise. So I was looking forward to this matchup and shutting up some critics. But man, on the Titans side of the ball, they released Adrian Peterson. I know that wasn't in the news, but they did do that. Uh, they have Dontrell Hilliard at running back. They got most likely will not have AJ Brown, so they will have Nick Westbrook Akina, Chester Rogers, and Dez Fitzpatrick at wide receiver. They did sign Golden Tate to their practice squad, but he probably won't learn the offense enough to really do anything in this game if he's even activated at all. Um, so I don't expect him until after the bye. Guys, there's really nothing on this Titans side of the ball. They lost their top 2 running backs, their top 4 wide receivers, and their top tight end. All they have right now is Ryan Tannehill, who just had his career high in interceptions against the Houston Texans, last place defense. On the Titans side of the ball, I'm not starting anybody. There's not a single person I'm starting. Patriots defense is really good. There's nobody worth playing in this matchup. I hope the Titans defense plays strong enough and keeps the score low enough that it is still a good fight. But fantasy wise, Titans are a dead zone. Don't touch them.
And probably start the Patriots defense with how well they've been playing going against all those backups, unfortunately.
Yep.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the Patriots defense are like, at this point, no matter who they're playing start, is dominant as they've been. I feel like it's a few years ago when they were the number 1 defense, scoring as many points as running backs. I feel like we're getting back to that with them. I do want to say, I think the Titans are going to win this game. I've watched the Titans every game this year that they are not supposed to win. The Buffalo Bills, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Los Angeles Rams. I thought I messed up their name. Nobody gave them a shot. Nobody is giving them a shot against the New England Patriots. This team could lose to the Jets and the Texans any day of the week, but a team they're supposed to lose to, absolutely not. It's Mike Vrabel against Bill Belichick. They have a history. We saw it in the playoffs before. We saw him get cute with the play clock and penalties. Like, Mike Vrabel's going to have his team ready. And I know he's not the hot name. He's not the sexy name for Coach of the Year. But when he pulls off this win, he should be number 1 on the Coach of the Year list.
Hell yeah. Cody's
Man, that was
getting me fired up over
inspirational.
here. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to run through a brick wall for you right now, Cody. This is great.
It's too bad he didn't do that after we talked about the Patriots at least a little bit, because now we have to talk about what Patriots do we think are going to do well despite the Titans supposedly winning this game. Is there anybody really?
To be fair, the Titans defense is still a strong defense. We've lost a lot of pieces on offense, but on defense, corner is still a very sketchy thing to go with. But Jackrabbit Jenkins is going to be back this week, and he has been playing decently this year. We also have Elijah Molden, Christian Fulton. They are good cornerbacks. So on the wide receiver side, you might catch a big play out of Kendrick Bourne. You're probably going to get a few catches out of Jacoby Myers. But on the reality, I don't think any receiver is going to dominate this game. And on the running back side, I like Damian Harris and I like Ramondre Stevenson. The issue is I like them both, and I don't like that they're both getting utilized about an equal amount. It's a running back by committee. It is a split backfield. And they also have Brandon Bolden coming in there and catching passes as well. So it's a 3-headed backfield. Really, the only guy I like starting in this matchup is Hunter Henry.
And I'm with you. I mean, I'm not even a huge fan of Mac Jones. He just doesn't throw enough touchdowns for me. They love to run the ball. I think if you have Harris or Stevenson, they're in your starting lineup. But I feel like they're going to be 1 week it's going to be a Harris game, 1 week it's going to be a Stevens game. But you got to have them in there because on the off chance they both score a touchdown, which is a high possibility because that's how much the Patriots love to run the ball. But yeah, the Patriots, they've looked really good. We all hear it. They're on a big win streak. They could be the top of or they're the top of the AFC East again. Like, but at the same time, like there's not a lot of fantasy options on this team.
Yeah, you got to
No,
think
and I
about
mean, I know
fantasy.
you
You can't
said
just think
that.
about the teams.
Yeah.
Go ahead, George.
I know you said that like Mac Jones doesn't throw many touchdowns, but when he does throw touchdowns, it seems like it's to Hunter Henry. So that's why, yeah, that has to be the lock in your lineup. But there's not many other pieces. This game is almost a complete fantasy wasteland. We can move on to another game then that has a lot more fantasy options. That'd be the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cincinnati Bengals. The Steelers wide receivers are definitely still a question. I think you got Deontay Johnson and then not much of anything after that, which is not the case for the beginning of the season. But Chase Claypool has just been frustrating. I was so in, and he's just not done anything.
Yeah, but he came off an injury against the Chargers, and he saw a decent amount of targets. Now, they didn't connect on all those targets. It didn't turn into a big fantasy day. I think it was between 7 and 9. I'm thinking that's where it was for him in half-point PPR. So not like the best fantasy day, but he was getting involved. And, and we talked about it a little bit before the show off air. The other guy that you have to consider is Pat Fryermuth. Eric Ebron is injured again. So the big three for the Steelers pass catchers, and then maybe 4 if you want to include Najee Harris because he's been getting targets. Deontay Johnson is number 1. Pat Fryermuth is number 2. But I do like Chase Claypool as a flex option, especially in this matchup. I think it's a rivalry game. They're going to be hyped. The Bengals, they won the earlier matchup, which is when we're like, oh, the Bengals team might be for real this year, at least a playoff contender. And it's going to be a big game for them. It's going to be a big game for the Steelers. And they're both going to go through with a lot of fight. And if they're both going to want to get their playmakers involved. And I think the Steelers want to get Claypool going.
And it is worth noting that Claypool is that big play guy. So we're saying it's frustrating. It's frustrating. This week he get 2 50-yard touchdowns and be like, oh, well, here's Claypool. You just never know when he's going to actually break out. But I think we covered everybody else there when you said Najee Harris. And so we can move on to the Bengals side. The Bengals, we mentioned it a little bit on our Tuesday show. They committed to Joe Mixon last week. And it seemed like their passing game and Joe Burrow suffered. I don't think that's something that's going to be in the recipe every single week, but Joe Mixon's obviously an obvious play. But outside of Jamar Chase, who has started to see a little bit of dip in production, I think defenses are respecting him more. Do you still play T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, or are you worried that that passing offense is getting a little bit more pedestrian?
Well, I said in the beginning of the year that it's going to be a 3-headed split and it's going to be a dart throw on the 3 of which one you want to start each week. I think that is completely gone now. Jamar Chase is the obvious number 1, and their points are very, very similar. But watching the games personally, I like T. Higgins as the number 2. If you have to play a receiver after Jamar Chase, the guy that I like the most right now is T. Higgins.
Yeah, I'm actually a Tyler Boyd fan, but it's a coin flip for the number 2. Like Jamar Chase is the guy, and then the T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd is which one is going to have more catches? Because one's going to have 5 catches, the other one's going to have 2. That just seems how it's been all season long. But I think the big thing we have to look at for this game is we have to monitor the COVID lists for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We saw last week, this elite defense get shredded by Justin Herbert and the Los Angeles Chargers, but they were missing some key pieces because of COVID, especially like Minkah Fitzpatrick. If he's back, that'd be a big boost for them. We also have to watch cornerback Joe Hayden. He did not practice again. He could miss another game with his foot injury. So if their defense isn't back to full strength, I think it gives all the passing options a little bit of an uptick.
So would it depend on the defensive injury report if you'd like to play Joe Burrow this week, or is Joe Burrow a decent play when from teams that may be missing Kyler Murray or Patrick Mahomes?
I feel pretty confident playing Joe Burrow. He might, because he has potential to be a top 3 quarterback on the week. Like they like to throw enough that he could be up there. I know Joe Mixon has had some pretty good weeks. The last few, I believe he's had 2 touchdowns in the last 2 games. That'll probably regress to the mean a little bit. and Joe Burrow will probably get some touchdown passes. So I do like this one, especially with these guys coming back. Again, we just saw Justin Herbert have a huge day against this defense. I know it's a rivalry game. It'll probably be closer, more hard fought, but I do like Joe Burrow a lot, especially this week.
Yeah, I agree with you, Cody. I think he's becoming a fringe quarterback one. He's almost on the level where you can just play him at quarterback every week and just be fine. Especially with the downswing of quarterbacks that we've been having this year. He's becoming one of the more consistent guys.
All right, I think that'll wrap up Steelers Bengals. We can move on to our last 1 o'clock game. Another real winner of a game, the Atlanta Falcons and the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Kyle
So I'll start
Pitts,
with the
move on.
Jaguars. Not even James Robinson if he's healthy.
Yeah, James Robinson, of course, if he's healthy. If he's healthy is the big asterisk there.
So James Robinson, Kyle Pitts. Okay.
Anything
to add, Tyler? Are we good?
Any update on the Cordarrelle Patterson injury?
George Vamp, I'll look it up. George, you're failing at vamping. George, we're counting on you.
Complain.
All right, on Vamp's sake, I think if Cordarrelle Patterson is healthy, he is definitely worth considering in this matchup. It's going against a bad defense, and he's a guy that you might want to look at down the stretch if he can stay healthy. You definitely have to worry about it because of the fact that it could be season-ending or it could be just a week-to-week injury. We don't 100% know. It really depends on following the practice reports.
Yeah, he was limited on Wednesday. So at least he's getting back there on the football field. That means he's probably trending in the right direction to play again this season. Whether or not it will be this week will still be determined. But I agree. If he is out there, he's probably back in your lineups because there is really no other running back. Like, they all looked bad when he was out last Thursday when they played against the Patriots? Yeah, it was a rough day for them. So Patterson isn't instantly back in your lineup, which is crazy because he's a guy that I thought was pretty much done for, and now he's like a top fantasy option.
All right, so we got Pitts, Patterson, James Robinson, and potentially Dan Arnold, and that is pretty much it in this entire matchup. Another fantasy wasteland.
And that'll move us on to 4 o'clock. You got 3 games in the 4 o'clock window. We'll start with the LA Chargers and the Denver Broncos. Broncos, I guess we can start with, and the wide receivers, because they always seem to be taken enough away from each other that they're all kind of sketchy plays. Leader in the clubhouse is Jerry Jeudy. Chargers defense has been decent, not quite top tier. Do you have any problems playing Jeudy this week?
I like Jeudy. I like him more than Sutton. I like him more than Tim Patrick moving forward. I think Tim Patrick is better than Sutton as well. I really don't like Courtland Sutton fantasy-wise. He's become one of my biggest fantasy pet peeves and one of my biggest I'm not touching him guys. That'll be fun for the offseason to talk about. But I like Jerry Jeudy. I think he'll be all right. I don't think this matchup is, that great for him. I don't know. I don't really like anybody from the Broncos side. They're all kind of sketchy.
I'm with you.
Noah Fant is a borderline solid tight end to play, but even him, I don't know. This whole team is just sketchy to me.
Yeah, I think we've seen, the Teddy Bridgewater experience come down to he is a really good backup that could win you a few games if he has to start in a short stint, but he is not the long-term answer at starting quarterback. And that sucks because, Teddy Bridgewater, he overcame a horrific leg injury to get back into football. And unfortunately, he's just not up to the caliber to be a starting quarterback full time. And I'm with you. There's not a guy I really like starting on this offense, especially Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton. Jerry Jeudy came back in week 8 and has been playing with Courtland Sutton since. And neither of them have scored more than 7 points since week 8 in half point PPR. So, I think it's just time to move on. And the Chargers defense isn't the best defense, but they're playing much better as of late. Now you might say the Chargers could probably put up points and make this a pass happy game, but the Denver defense is what's better about this team. So maybe they can keep it a little bit close. It is divisional. So I'm moving away from pretty much all the Broncos pass catching options.
So how about their running options? I mean, I know we say you pretty much have to play Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon every week just because of the way the running back position shakes out, but even they're a little bit mediocre at points. Like unless they're touchdown dependent, really. But
They're both like projected to get you about 10. They're both going to
Mhm.
somehow find a way to get 10. And like 10 is a decent enough number that if you need a running back, you can play one of them, but like I don't know about you guys, but when I'm looking at a running back to play in my fantasy lineup, I'm hoping he can get more than 10, which is all I expect out of these two guys. So if I have somebody else, I'm going to play them. I had a league with Melvin Gordon. I traded him away because I was tired of him. I have a league with Javonte Williams. I haven't started him once. They split this backfield 50-50. They keep the way they're playing this backfield makes it seem like they're hinting towards finally giving Javonte Williams the ball and letting him be their guy, but they just don't do it. They keep letting it be a split. They still let Melvin Gordon hang around enough and get utilized enough that you don't know who's the number one. Honestly, it's a two-headed backfield and not a great two-headed backfield. It's not a Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. It's a Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams. I don't love either of these guys. Not
Yeah, I
yet,
feel
anyway.
like this is very similar to the Patriots backfield, except I'm pretty confident that both of them will see 10 carries or more. Like they're both because they run the ball so much. Where the Broncos, they're struggling to get some carries. I mean, they had a really good game against Dallas, but they were up pretty much that whole game. We've seen games where a lot of times it's split, 9-8, 10-8. Like it's very close. Like even last week, they were split. Melvin Gordon, here was his stat line: 9 attempts, 45 yards, 4 targets. Javonte Williams, 8 carries, 48 yards, 3 targets. Like these dudes, like they literally have it down to a science on how to be a 50-50 split. I talked about it on the earlier show this week. I do think Javonte Williams is a guy to keep a name on, maybe go out and try to trade for because the playoff schedule for these guys is really good, and I'll take the rookie over Melvin Gordon as a breakout potential to help me win a league. But until one of them start to really overtake the starting role, I can't trust any of them in my lineup.
and I can just hit on here before we move on to the Chargers. In a dynasty, maybe the owner of Javonte Williams is a little frustrated with how this is shaking out. Not a bad time to go out and try to buy him if you're in a situation looking at the future, because I believe this is the last year on Melvin Gordon's contract. He's probably moving on
Correct.
after this. Javonte Williams, we could be looking at him in a completely different light this offseason going into next season, just because he could be the only guy in that backfield, which is all we've been hoping for. But I think that can put a bow on the Broncos for this week. We can move on to the Chargers side of the ball. You're starting your obvious with Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler. The question every week now seems to be Mike Williams. Denver's also got a fairly solid defense. Would you debate a Mike Williams in a situation here?
I think
I'd
you
play
have
Mike
to because
Williams.
their offense is good. But I mean, we've seen he's had some down weeks. He started off so strong, and then he had from week 6 to 10, he had 2, 2, 6, and 3. Like that was his fantasy points. He was back up to 15 last week. He saw 6 targets. Like he's coming around. Keenan Allen has surpassed him as the go-to option. Austin Eckler is probably the second option, but it is a high scoring offense. So I think Mike Williams is definitely back in your flex considerations, but he isn't the wide receiver one we saw for the first few weeks of the season.
Yeah, and it is worth noting that though he did have 15 this week, a lot of those points came on that very end of the game, big play touchdown to him at the end of the game. So he was struggling a little bit before that. But even with that being said, I agree with you, Cody, 100%. I think he is back in your flex. I never thought that the way he was putting up points to start the season was going to be reliable all season long. I never thought that was going to be something we'd expect to see all season. I think what you're seeing now, where he's getting 8 to 15, is a lot more expected with the potential to break 20 if he gets multiple touchdowns. But 8 to 15, the way fantasy has been this year, where guys are getting you 50 or they're getting you 0. Um, I'm totally cool with having a flex that gets 8 to 15. That is 100% solid with me.
All right. So Think about Mike Williams in our lineups there. We can move on to our next game. The other LA, the LA Rams, are traveling to Cody's Green Bay Packers. Cody, I'll just let you start with your breakdown of the Packers because I know one hot name this week was MVS.
Yeah, MVS was the hot name. He saw 8 targets, I believe it was, last week. He obviously had the 75-yard touchdown. I was a guy they wanted to get involved. He seemed to be going on. That was also because Alan Lazard was missing from that game. Alan Lazard is back in practice on Wednesday in a limited capacity, so keep an eye out on him. Obviously, the big name that you'll see on the practice report all week is Aaron Rodgers with his toe. Like I mentioned at the top, he's already said he's not going to sit out. He'll probably end up practicing on Friday in a limited capacity. He'll be good to go for Saturday. Devontae Adams showed up on the injury report limited. Again, that's probably more precautionary, keeping him rest. Don't worry about him. You're playing Devontae Adams. Like Devontae Adams is in your lineup no matter what. The most surprising one to me and a thing to watch out for is Aaron Jones is back practicing in a limited capacity. Now, if you would, I still don't believe he's going to play this week. To me, he is such a key piece to that. I know it is a huge matchup. Like this could literally determine the number 1 seed in the NFC as we get down the line here. It is a huge matchup, so you want as many star players as you want. But Aaron Jones is so vital to your team that I would expect him to be held out until after the bye. That's just what I think. I know the Packers are traditionally a cautious medical team. That's typically how they proceed with things. So I don't expect him to be out there. And I think we also have to talk about this offensive line. David Bakhtiari isn't coming back. He had to get knee surgery. They're looking for him to come after the bye. He had to get his knee cleaned up. We just lost Alton Jenkins. This is going to be a patchwork offensive line versus the number 2 game in pass rush win rate in the LA Rams and number 1 against the run stopping win rate. So definitely going to be a tough day at the office for running backs and could be a tough day for Aaron Rodgers. So I think this can be a hard fought game. Not the high scoring explosion that we saw last week. It could be a tough one. If Aaron Jones is out there, I'm still like AJ Dillon over him. I think he'll get the majority of the carries and Aaron Jones would end up being a wrinkle in the offense. But again, I don't expect Aaron Jones to play. But as always, we'll keep you updated on Sunday.
So do you have any fear with Devontae Adams facing off against Jalen Ramsey? Are you tampering your expectations at all on him?
Nope. I don't think Jalen Ramsey will follow him, in all honesty. I think Jalen Ramsey will cover him in the slot and when he's on the right side of the field. I don't think he'll travel him to the left side of the field. I could be completely wrong with that. And we saw Jalen Ramsey, or I should say Devontae Adams, get the best of Jalen Ramsey in the playoff just in 2020. So maybe he probably won't be another 2 touchdown day like we saw against Minnesota just because touchdowns will slow down. But they're still going to try to get him involved. I still expect, 9+ targets, hopefully a touchdown. Maybe he'll only be at 70 yards instead of over 100 because there'll be a lot of short game. But yeah, I think Devontae Adams is still pretty safe. If you want to temper expectations, you can do that, but it's still Devontae Adams. Like he's still a top 5 fantasy wide receiver this week, I think.
Well, one of the other best corners in the NFL is on the other side of the ball with the Packers, and the Packers have a way of shutting down number 1 receivers. Do you think that people should tamper their expectations with Cooper Kupp this week?
Nope. Jair's still not playing.
Jair's still not playing?
And Kevin King did not practice. So we're going to look at Eric Stokes and Rasul Douglas most likely being the starting options.
Rasul Douglas, yes.
Hey, Rasul Douglas had a good week last week.
Hey, he had the game-winning interception against Arizona. He's no slouch.
Yes.
Rasul Douglas, Chandon Sullivan. I feel like we're the Eagles secondary from a few years ago, except they're playing a lot better than they did when they were in Philly.
Rasul Douglas had his moments, but not quite the moments he's having in Green Bay. But anyway, no, I'm not tempering expectations on Cooper Kupp. I'm more questioning, what do we do with OBJ?
I don't like him. I'm not starting him. I'm benching him. Don't care. Van Jefferson's the number 2 in that offense, in my opinion. I think you're starting Cooper Kupp. You're starting Darrell Henderson. You can start Higbee. I mean, he gets enough targets, even though he had some dropsies last week or last game. But I think Van Jefferson's the number 2 in that offense. I was really sad to see that Van was going to go to the bench once they got OBJ, and they still had Robert Woods. But with Woods out, and OBJ doesn't have the chemistry with Matt Stafford just yet, I think Van is the guy that you're going to start if you have to start a Rams receiver. I'm not saying cut OBJ. I think he could definitely start building a chemistry in that offense, but I want to see more out of him before I'm throwing him into my lineup.
Yeah, I do think they've had some. They had the bye week. They'll definitely draw up some plays for OBJ. He'll definitely be more involved than he was 4 days after he signed there. Uh, I do want to talk about Darrell Henderson. He has been pretty solid this year, but if unless I'm mistaken, even if counting week 1, the Packers haven't allowed a 100-yard rusher yet this year, which is pretty crazy thinking about how bad their run defense has been for the last years. They've still given up touchdowns. But it's going to take a touchdown for Darrell Henderson to be on the scoreboard. So if they end up, in a low scoring affair, if it ends up being, all passing touchdowns, Henderson could have a down week this week. So just something to keep in the back of your mind. Definitely not saying sit him, but he will be more touchdown dependent this week than in weeks prior.
Some good insight there, and we'll see how that shakes out. But we have one more 4 o'clock game to talk about. We can go to the Minnesota Vikings traveling to the San Francisco 49ers. Now, we talked a little bit earlier in the week about the usage of Deebo Samuel, and if they're using him more at running back, someone's got to step up at wide receiver. I'm going to bring up Brandon Ayuk myself here because he has been more solid the last 3 weeks. Two of those games he broke 10 points. He's seeing more targets. If we think that Deebo is going to continue being used in the backfield, and that would mean a couple of wide receiver 1 snaps for Brandon Ayuk, are you confident enough to play him in a flex this week?
I think he is definitely flexible. You mentioned it. His targets have gone up. He's had 7 or more in 3 of the last 4 games. So, and the Vikings secondary has been dealing with injuries. I do know they got Patrick Peterson back last week, but they had another cornerback go out in that game. Not 100% sure on his status, but they've been allowed to give up points in the secondary. Now, this 49ers team still wants the ball to go through the ground game. They still want to run the ball. That's why they've used Deebo Samuel. I'd expect Elijah Mitchell to be back. There was talks of him playing last week. I think he'll be back this week. Jeff Wilson, another game back from his pretty serious injury. I think they can get him going. So they might fade away from using Deebo Samuel as much if both of those guys are back and feeling comfortable. But yeah, I think Brandon Ayuk is definitely a flexible option. I believe, Kyle Shanahan has definitely changed his tune when he's asked about him. So Brandon Ayuk is a guy, and maybe it is just the pre-draft hype I'm still trying to hold off hope on. But I do think Brandon Ayuk is definitely coming around and could be a solid fantasy option down the stretch.
Yeah, I like Brandon Ayuk this week as well. I do think he's a good flex option. Elijah Mitchell is worth playing. We talked about Jeff Wilson looking really slow when he played. If Mitchell is going, he is worth starting. Although, be aware, like we talked about last episode, Deebo Samuel is being used a lot in the run game. That can steal some carries away from Elijah Mitchell if that continues. The other guy I want you to just be aware of, you're definitely starting him if you have him, but George Kittle, I think he's going to be one of the best tight ends in fantasy the rest of the year as expected. But one thing to just tamper your expectations on a little bit is George Kittle, since coming back from injury, has scored a touchdown in every single game. And I think that's a pace that we can't really expect him to just keep up. He definitely has the potential to score touchdowns in every game, but before this season, he was never known as a touchdown guy. He was known as a reception guy. But his points these past few weeks have been coming off of touchdowns. So I don't think you can expect that trend to continue. Be ready for a lower game from George Kittle within the next few weeks once that touchdown doesn't hit him. But I still think if you have George Kittle, you're obviously going to have him in your lineup.
Man, I feel like you're calling your shot on this one, like Cody a few weeks ago did with Hunter Henry, saying Hunter Henry scored a touchdown in 3 straight games. He might not score one here, and he didn't. So we'll see how right you are when we go into next week's show. Moving over to the Vikings side, they're pretty obvious. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook. Hopefully, I don't think anything's going to come from this situation with his name being dropped in that video earlier, but I'd like Alexander Madison as a stash still if you still haven't stashed him in your league. Anyone else from the Vikings?
Yes.
I assume we're excluding Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. Or did I just totally blank and then you mentioned them?
I said Jefferson, Thielen, and Cook.
Okay, I totally blanked on Jefferson and Thielen, but I'm glad you did say them because I was about to question, do you still have credibility to be a podcast host if you didn't include those two? But you definitely do. I know, no shots fired. And the only other guy I got to talk about is Tyler Conklin. He's always on the dartboard, but because he's touchdown dependent. Um, he'll get 4 or 5 targets a game, but will one of those be in the end zone? That's the biggest question.
It is time to finally give somebody some love. A guy that we've made fun of on this podcast, a guy that is made fun of in the media, and despite having an amazing season, not one person is talking about this guy, and that is Kirk Cousins. Guys, it's time to finally give Cousins some love here. This guy has 21 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions on the season. He's on pace to break one of Tom Brady's all-time touchdown to interception rates if he continues that. He has had a passer rating over 100 in his last 3 weeks, and that's including against good defenses like the Packers, like the Chargers. So he's playing great football right now. It's also worth noting that on the season, only Kyler Murray and Aaron Rodgers have a better passer rating for the season than Kirk Cousins out of qualified starters. This guy is playing great. I think it's time to start looking at him for if he can keep this up, he's worth looking at for bigger awards like MVP. I know it sounds crazy, but he's in the top 10 in yards, great touchdown to interception rate. He's worth looking at. And, I said it last week, even though Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen get points, you still can't start Cousins. I think it's time to start thinking about Cousins because honestly, quarterbacks have been bad this year, and I don't see how Kirk Cousins can be really a worse option than what you've been getting fantasy wise. So I think that Cousins is worth a look this week.
What time is their game? Just to double check.
It's 4:00. It's not quite a prime time, so you're definitely
Okay,
safe with that.
I
I
can
had
go
to
with
double
Cousins
check
for
that.
that. Yeah.
I double checked with that for sure. I will, if I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate on Kirk Cousins, I don't think you can deny that he is playing above expectations this year. I'm not trying to argue that, but if you look at last game, he has. You know how we talked about Patrick Mahomes at the beginning of the year? He has had some really bad interceptions, but then he's also had a lot of interceptions go off players' hands. There's almost to be like a interception luck category. I haven't watched a ton of Kirk Cousins because I can't stand the Vikings. So I watch highlights and those show all the good plays. But watching him against the Packers, he still made a lot of great throws, under pressure. I don't want to take away from how well he played, but he threw one interception that got called back on by the rule book, it's roughing the passer, but it was kind of, a touchy call. But that gets called every week. So I'm not arguing that. Then he also had 4 dropped interceptions, 3 by Darnell Savage, and 1 very controversial one at the end of the game. So Kirk Cousins will still throw interceptions. The defense just hasn't come down with the ball. If he can carry that through the whole season, like Tyler mentioned, definitely in the MVP conversation. But as things do, they tend to like to regress to the mean. We could see an uptick in interceptions as they start playing 4:00 games, primetime games where he hasn't excelled in. But I agree with Snyder. We joke about him a lot. We do have to show him a little bit of love when he's excelling, and he has been a top fantasy quarterback this season, and it's time that we give him the respect that he deserves.
Cody's calling his shot on Kirk Cousins. I'm calling my shot on George Kittle. Yeah, Kirk Cousins is the 8th ranked quarterback and is averaging over 20 points a week as a fantasy quarterback. And I don't think that's something you can say about a lot of these fantasy quarterbacks. So he's definitely worth taking a look at in fantasy moving forward.
Definitely not a bad call there. And that means we can move on to Sunday Night Football. We got the Cleveland Browns traveling to the Baltimore Ravens. We'll start on the Browns side where there's news that Kareem Hunt could be back this week. So he could be back to the traditional Chubb Hunt backfield. Would you start Kareem Hunt week 1? I know this has no effect on Nick Chubb. You always have played Nick Chubb regardless of Kareem Hunt's status. But I think the question's more, would you throw Kareem Hunt back in your flex right away?
Probably not.
No, I want to see what I'm getting out of Kareem Hunt personally. I want to see what I'm getting out of him before I throw him back into my lineup. I think you're playing Nick Chubb. I think really the only fantasy news that comes out of Kareem Hunt coming back this week is, potentially being able to just cut Dearness Johnson, because I don't think he's going to really have the same usage that he did. I think he's still going to be used in the offense. I think he's been playing so well that there's no way, even with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, that they just flat out bench him. That's disrespectful to a guy that has been playing that well for you. But he's definitely not going to be fantasy relevant again until these running backs go down. So I think this week you can probably get rid of Dearness Johnson, and you're definitely starting Nick Chubb, not Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, I think that wraps it up. And there's really no wide receivers from the Browns that I'm interested in starting. The tight ends, they're too split between the three of them. So really, I feel like we say it all the time, but this high-powered offense, it's struggling right now. And I mean, they only put up 13 points against the Lions. Nick Chubb is the guy that you have to play. And I think that's another reason why I'm hesitant to play Kareem Hunt first week back, is just because the offense hasn't looked that well over the last few weeks. But from the Ravens standpoint, this is a big matchup. We'll be interested to see if Lamar Jackson has to leave for cramps. I mean, it is a big game. Now, I'm not trying to pick on Lamar Jackson. If he did have to, go take a shit like everyone expects, I'm right there with you. My stomach, Tyler is right there with you. We have our own gastrointestinal issues. I don't know why I try to say a big word instead of just saying stomach, but issues that when it's time to go, it's time to go. So no hard feelings. Props to him. I also feel bad for him that in 2 years of COVID, like, he missed a game with illness that wasn't COVID related. Like, that has to be like terrible. Like, most guys try to play through, and like this virus, whatever it was, definitely got a hold of him. Got a hold of Marquise Brown, who's also limited with a thigh injury. So that's going to be a big name to keep your eye out for, because it is the Sunday night game. Marquise Brown has been a top 10 fantasy wide receiver this season, but having to wait to see if he's a good time go. Hopefully they give us some clarity when the final practice report comes out Friday or Saturday. But that is definitely a name you should definitely keep your eye on. And if he doesn't go, but Lamar's back, I think Rashad Bateman would be a solid and perfect play this week.
That's definitely what I was going to say, because I mean, Bateman's also not widely owned still for some reason. So you could be in a situation where you have Marquise Brown, you can add Rashad Bateman as your insurance policy, and as long as Lamar goes, one of the two or both should be fantasy relevant. And then moving on to that backfield, I talked up Devontae Freeman earlier this week, and Tyler, I know you said be wary because Lamar did not play last week, or it might have been Cody, but are you worried about Devontae Freeman with Lamar coming back into the lineup, or are you confident enough that he's getting enough carries that he can still be a fantasy starter for
you? Bless you.
Thank you. Yeah. Wow. All right. That hit me. Sorry. I guess every time somebody mentions the Ravens, it just kind of makes me sick. But Ooh. I think Devontae Freeman is becoming solidified. Gosh, I am sorry. Started talking about the Ravens again. So I think Devontae Freeman is making himself a solidified running back one in that offense. I think that he is overtaking Latavius Murray. I think it's going to be Devontae Freeman moving forward. The issue is if they get down into the red zone, let's say you had a bet $5 and they're on the 5-yard line. Would you put that $5 on Devontae Freeman running the ball in, or Lamar Jackson running the ball in? I know my $5 is going on Lamar. I know that's where it's going to go. I feel like he's the more dynamic runner. He's the guy that they're going to want to give the touchdown to. So I think Devontae could get you some yards, get you some carries, but I think Lamar is going to steal enough touchdowns that you still need to be a little bit cautious on Devontae Freeman. Tamper your expectations. He's not going to be going and putting up like 20s for you. He's going to be getting like 12 a game, I think.
I think it is worth noting for the NFL standpoint, Devontae Freeman in his last 2 games has been what is going on with all the sneezes? I'm trying to talk. I can't handle it.
At least he muted
I'm trying
himself.
to tell you. That is true. At least he.
Did I get it? I got it. Okay.
So if you don't know, if you didn't hear a sneeze, that's because go check out the face George made. #SneezeFace. Tag us on Twitter. But Devontae Freeman has been a top 12 running back in his last 2 games. So just something to keep an eye on there. He has been putting up points, and one of those was without Lamar, one was with Lamar, but I think that's why we've seen them waive Le'Veon Bell. Latavius Murray didn't look like he was fully back from his injury yet. Maybe he'll start to slowly overtake snaps, but for right now, I think Freeman is definitely a guy that has become the guy that you can start from Baltimore.
Well, I know Lamar and Marquise missed that game with some kind of upper respiratory infection. So before we keep catching that, let's move on to Monday Night Football. We got the Seattle Seahawks going to the Washington Football Team. The Seahawks backfield is still an absolute mess. I know we had originally with like Alex Collins was the guy. We got DJ Dallas working in there a lot more now. Is there anybody from that backfield that is viable for fantasy, or have we just hit fantasy wasteland status on them because of their running back by committee?
Fantasy wasteland. And I do want to quick correct myself about our last matchup. Devontae Freeman has been a top 12 in 2 of the last 3 games because nobody did good against that Thursday night game against the Dolphins, so I chose to forget about it, which all Ravens fans are out there like, so did we. But anyways, back to the matchup we're talking about, the Seattle Seahawks. Yeah, their backfield is a mess. DJ Dallas did look pretty good last week, but I still think Alex Collins would be the guy that you have to feel the most confident again. But yeah, this running back by committee is not one that I want any parts of.
I agree, but I think there's so many running backs this year that you're like, man, they should be getting points, they should be getting starts, but they're not worth starting. I mean, look, if it's Alex Collins and we go back to our earlier question of Ty Johnson or David Johnson, which one are you starting out of the three? Like, it's all the same level. There's so many guys that are borderline, but we need to remember that it's not just um 10 team leagues out there that we're talking to. It's not even just 12 team leagues. We are talking to some 14 to 16, maybe some even crazier leagues than that. So if you're in one of those really deep leagues, which guy do you like better? Do you like a David Johnson or do you like an Alex Collins?
Matchup wise, I'm going to go with, wow, I say matchup wise, like the
Ooh,
Washington football team has been the same defense, but they have looked better the last 2 weeks. And I'm not counting how many points they just gave to Chris McCaffrey because he's elite. But the Jets have been really bad. So I think I would go David Johnson in this choice. But again, we're talking coin flips here. If you want, I'll be happy to put it in the wheel of like I did for George with Brandon Ayuk and
and
Tyler
then
Lockett.
pick the opposite of what the wheel says.
You never go against the wheel. It's like the magic conch. You always listen to it.
Well, it didn't work for me, so I'm against it. I would probably say I'm slightly more confident in Alex Collins because I've seen it out of him this year, unlike David Johnson. I mean, I guess you can say David Johnson had a really good week 1, but that was literally it. So I would lean Alex Collins, but like we've been saying, if there's any week to play David Johnson, it's this week or bust. So
Well, moving on from the running back position, you got the wide receivers, and you got, I mean, I know Freddie Swain has been getting some catches this year and stealing some fantasy points, but really you have 2 receivers worth noting. It's DK Metcalf, it's Tyler Lockett. The issue is Russell Wilson does not look like Russell Wilson. Um, we've seen it 2 weeks in a row now where he's just missing. He's not the guy that we've seen over the past few years. I don't think he's fully healed from his thumb injury, and I think it shows. And I think because of that, and with no backfield to really help spill the pass game out any, I don't really like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett as much as I did in preseason either. I mean, I think if you have them, odds are you're starting them because of their name, because of their potential. But I think if you're rolling into this matchup with those guys, you need to tamper your expectations a little bit. Don't expect that big, 25-point game from either one of them because, Lockett broke 2 long touchdowns or DK got like 17 catches and was all over the field. Don't expect what we've seen out of them before. I think they're both going to be startable. I think they're both going to put up okay numbers. I don't think they're going to win you your matchup personally.
yeah, and I think like I just want to double up on that and say Tyler Lockett, we were treating it like he was injured when Russell Wilson was out. Even though Russell Wilson has not been great in these 2 games back, his target numbers have gone way up. He actually had a decent fantasy week last week. He is relevant again. I think DK is probably still their lead horse, but Tyler Lockett is back into fantasy relevance. I'm with you, though. I don't love playing either of them. They're probably the low-end wide receiver, too, or you hope you get you flex number kind of thing.
Yeah, you have to temper expectations, but they're both definitely in your lineup because if Russ finds it this week, you don't want to be caught trying to get cute by not playing Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf. Maybe he's still used to, practicing on air and throwing to air. Who knows? I feel like I was just so mean to Russell Wilson, and he seems like such a great dude. I apologize, Russell Wilson. No hard feelings here. But let's talk about the Washington football team. The guy I want to talk about might not even play this week, but he has been activated off IR, and that is Logan Thomas, former 90 overall quarterback for the Virginia Tech Hokies and
I feel like he's never
14.
announced Logan Thomas without mentioning that.
That is my favorite stat of all time. It's not really a stat, it's a fact, but it doesn't matter. He is back practicing. If he does play, which we're not going to probably know if he's going to go until Monday, so he probably can't start him in your lineup. Unless you also have Ricky Seals-Jones or he's available and you just want to take a flyer that way at tight end, which isn't the worst option. But if he's back, should be the go-to guy. I really like Logan Thomas down the stretch as a guy maybe go out and trade for if you can. If the guys held him on to this long, they probably know he's coming back and they're not going to move on for him, but just never hurts to try, especially with trade deadlines coming up. But outside of him, you got Terry McLaurin and Antonio Gibson, the guys you're going to start, but neither of them have been where you drafted them value-wise all season, so they're not guys I love playing, but again, they're like DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. Don't try to get too cute by not playing star players. They've had some down weeks, but they've also had some really big weeks.
I agree. I think McLaurin is frustrating. Like I said on the last episode, I think if you have McLaurin and he just had that big week for you, I think now's the time to trade him because his playoff matchup is terrible. But guys, I'm maybe just asking as a friend because in our league of record, I had to pick him up and start him. But do you have any confidence against this Seattle defense playing Taylor Heineke with how consistent he's been playing lately?
I mean, Seattle's not the same defense that they were a couple years ago when they had the Legion of Boom. Taylor Heineke went from like borderline talking about losing his job to putting his game together again. I think you can definitely do worse at quarterback than Taylor Heineke. I don't see any problem starting him. I mean, don't take that as start him over like Joe Burrow, because no, like those borderline QB1s, if you have those as an option, still definitely play that. But if you're fishing on the waiver wire, say you don't have a Kirk Cousins out there, Taylor Heineke is a fine play for this week. The matchup's not bad, and he's been solid.
Yeah, it's not a start I feel a ton of confidence in. Correct me if I'm wrong, because we're talking about your league of record team. You do have Terry McLaurin as well. So I do like that you went out and got the stackable option. I think that was a smart play. So that probably gives them an uptick over who was some of the available free agent quarterbacks. I really wish you had Stephon Diggs, so maybe I could trade you Cam Newton for him. It seems like a fair deal. But I don't even know why.
We can just have Jefferson.
A little yeah,
your favorite.
I love that. We cannot go into how much I love Justin Jefferson again and how much I hate that he's a Minnesota Viking. That I'm gonna have a whole podcast episode. I'm not even gonna record it. Tell you guys, I'm just gonna record it and post it, like my memoirs of why I love Justin Jefferson and hate that he's a Vikings. Stay tuned for that coming this offseason. Is there any other guys you want to talk about on the Washington football team? I think we hit them all. I think we hit all the matchups, but is there any guys? Nope. Looks like we're wrapping up. So I got one quick question for you that is not on the rundown, but I'm asked before we head out of here. What is the best Thanksgiving? I'm going to exclude turkey. We're going to say best Thanksgiving side dish. And mac and cheese is a Thanksgiving side dish. Don't at me, George.
No, I love mac and cheese. I am not complaining about mac and cheese. But just because it's not as special a Thanksgiving, I'm going to not make it my favorite. I have to pick stuffing. It's mashed potatoes with a bonus. So that's my thing.
I hate stuffing. I can't eat
mashed potatoes with a bonus.
Soggy bread.
So actually got to think about. So my mom actually makes a stuffing that is potato based, as a lot of people make a bread based stuffing. So there's two different ways to go. I've had both. I love both. I don't discriminate. But I'm actually used to growing up with a mashed potato based stuffing that has bread in it.
Sounds like a lot of carbs. You get
Yes,
potatoes
fantastic.
and bread. So it's probably
Thanksgiving.
fantastic.
We don't watch carbs on Thanksgiving. It is
Carbs
a
don't
cheat day.
count on Thanksgiving.
Look, the
Thanksgiving's a
Couch
cheat
GMs
day.
only watch carbs on the first week in January. The rest of the time,
Mhm.
carbs are out the window. But Tyler, you haven't answered yet.
Man, it's difficult because I'm thinking. I'm in a weird situation because most of my family grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and I usually have Thanksgiving with my family in Maryland, so they have crab legs every Thanksgiving. So that is actually a Thanksgiving dish at our house. I also love the random side dishes like the green bean casserole and um is this cheating? Can I go with pumpkin pie? I mean, it's not a side dish, it's a dessert, but like
Hey, I
there's
got a
no
pumpkin
rules on
pie hat right
Thanksgiving.
here. I'm glad you said it. A
Oh
pumpkin pie.
wow, he's got a turkey and a pumpkin pie. This guy.
I forgot that was down there. So pumpkin pie, you can definitely go with that. I was going to say the desserts too. So I was going to go with the pumpkin roll, the pumpkin pie, the apple pie, like the desserts, like the sweets. That's what I'm all about. Not only on Thanksgiving. I'm not really a big sweets fan outside of that, but Thanksgiving, give me all the sweets. I'm still going to say mac and cheese. I know that was a debate last year when I think Tyler couldn't be on the show and we'd had a little Thanksgiving Day draft between George and I, and he wouldn't let me have mac and cheese. So again, George, mac and cheese is a Thanksgiving dish. If you see one of those, build the best Thanksgiving dish on social media that has the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's always in the 5 section. Mac and cheese.
I love mac and cheese. I'm never going to complain. I'm just saying it's not as Thanksgiving specific, but I'll give it to you. It's fine. I can't fight mac
And thank you
cheese.
both for not saying cranberry sauce. Like I can't stand that stuff.
No.
No.
Okay,
Nope.
perfect. That is why we are 3 best friends and we do this podcast not because we love football, but because we hate cranberry sauce. And guys, first of all, happy Thanksgiving and thank you for listening to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast.
Yes, absolutely. Everybody out there, I mean, comment what your favorite Thanksgiving dish side dish is. If it is cranberry sauce, I mean, look, you could still be our fan, but we might judge you a little bit from here on out. But comment your favorite dish. I mean, let's have some fun with this. It's a holiday. Let's have some fun. Let's talk some food. Let's talk some football. The way that, the holiday was always meant to be celebrated. And I know this is a big holiday to celebrate with your family, but I want you guys out there to remember that we are your family too, because fantasy football is definitely a bitter family rivalry. But guys, as always, this podcast is so much more fun for us and more fun for you when you get involved. So please get involved.
George, I got to say something before you go. Do the last little bit.
Okay.
You said
Okay.
football, and I know we already talked about the Thursday night games or the Thursday day games. And I have to tell you something. Did you guys hear Dan Campbell on Jared Goff today? He was asked about his
No.
likelihood to play. He said, I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact quote and I don't have it in front of me, but it essentially said, there is a 60% chance of playing, but it's leaning closer to 50-50. What does that even mean?
Well, Jared Goff was
55%?
Jared Goff is officially playing, so clearly it's more towards 90-10. Jared Goff was named the starter the same day as that quote. So I don't know where that math comes in. That sounds like a show your work on math homework where you knew the answer, but you have no idea how you got there. And you're like, look, I don't know. It's 60-40, maybe 50-50. There's some division in there or something. I don't know.
Good old Dan Campbell.
He will be a legend forever because of his opening press conference with the Lions. But let me just say, start conversations like this with your family at Thanksgiving. No one needs politics or anything like that. Talk football, talk fantasy. Enjoy your family's company. Enjoy the games. Happy Thanksgiving to you both and everyone out there. And thank you for listening into the Couch GMs podcast. For Tyler Snyder and Cody Roadcap, I'm George Kerth, and we'll talk to you all next week.